It was just the most massive thing I've ever seen. To tell you the honest truth, I thought, well, we're the only ones left on this planet. Something's happened. They've missed something here.
The fear that went in me when I seen it was just like the feeling. I'd say it was fear, but I've never felt that feeling before in my entire life.
It's a weird feeling, like you can't explain it when you don't know. You feel like you're being followed, but you don't know what it is.
We had two to our right, another one in front of us, another one to the left, and another one just across the road, shaking the daylights out of the tree. All we get was a big red eye.
I remember waking up and looking at the end of the bed, and there was a figure there, almost insect-like, and then I blacked out.
Welcome to the show, everyone. My name is Cade Moyer, and you are listening to the Believe Paranormal and UFO podcast. If you have had an encounter and would like to share it, please get in touch with me. My email address is believepod@gmail.com. If you enjoy the podcast, be sure to leave us a rating or review wherever you listen, and head on over to our website, believepod.com, and consider becoming a member to get bonus episodes and video content. Tonight, we are joined by a very much returning guest to the podcast. I am, of course, talking about Attila Kaldy. He has just got a new documentary. It is about to get released. Actually, at the time of release of this podcast, it will be out in certain locations around the world. We are, of course, talking about Tracking the Law, Attila's second dip into the world of the yowie. Attila, welcome back to the podcast, mate.
Hey, Kate, thanks for having me.
It is great to have you here, mate. I always love it when you come on, and I always get a little bit worried because all my gear usually goes a little bit crazy when I talk to you. And I was actually talking to a friend the other day saying I was a little bit scared about having you on the podcast because I'm up to my third or fourth podcast recorder, and it always seems to go crazy when I talk to you.
Oh, no. What am I doing?
Mate, whatever you're doing, I like it because it kind of shows that the weird and the wonderful does follow you. And mate, your recent documentary is full of the weird and the wonderful. Not to give away too much of it, but mate, can you give those listening a little bit of a rundown of your second venture into the world of the yowie with Tracking the Law?
Absolutely, Cade. Look, this was an accident, to be honest, because after finished filming Track Search for Australia's Bigfoot, I was looking at having a bit of a break, at least 6 or 8 months. But and then basically the fires happened, and it was a tragic incident. And but from the ashes, there was also a curious question that was going through my mind, and the question was, what is actually happening with the Australian yowies? You know, the large guys and the small guys. So basically, what I did is I just put a pen to paper, and I started writing a production plan on it. And I actually pitched it to my wife first, and she said, "That's a fantastic idea. You should do something about that." And I also wanted to expand a little bit more on the story, and by that I mean expand on its origins and the connection with land and the connection with the Indigenous people of Australia, because I don't think there's been enough told about their stories and their connection with the forest folk. And it was quite a tragic period for me, especially straight after the fires and when we were allowed to go into the national parks, because the parks were closed for a very long time because of deadfall and everything else. But we managed to get to certain places, and especially some of the places that we visited and filmed at, and to see the devastation was absolutely heartbreaking. The animals, and the beautiful scenery, just the actual bush itself, and a lot of those sceneries that we had before the fires will never come back to the way they were, or if they do, mate, it'll be decades before they regenerate to at least the way they were beforehand. So to see all that, I actually went down south because there were parts down south that were hit really, really bad. And actually met up with I was introduced to an elder down there and his wife, and we became really good friends over time. And they suffered greatly from the fires, just like a lot of other people, and they lost almost everything, if not everything. They had a little community centre going down there, an Indigenous community centre in the rainforest, and Noel had his the elder. He had his workshop there, and he was doing some lovely craft work, some really nice cultural artwork, and all that just got basically burned to nothing, and he had to start all over again. So there's a big story around that, about why the fires happened, why we think the fires happened. And this is looking through the eyes of the Indigenous elders, and I interviewed. I actually interviewed 2 elders, and I interviewed a few people who are First Nation people. And one of them is an author who I interviewed, and people who are interested in the Australian Aboriginal and Indigenous culture will probably recognise Bruce Pascoe's name, who wrote Dark Emu. I actually interviewed Bruce because I read his book, and it was a fascinating book. It's about his findings, and not just his findings, but findings around Australia. It's extremely controversial, but a lot of the stuff that's in his book makes sense about the how evolved the Indigenous culture were before the Europeans settled here, and the complexity of their society, which was completely overlooked. So we go from that, and I interview Noel. I actually go down South Coast, and I interview him at where his house was, and we start talking about the fires and what happened and what would be the best thing to do. And all this is actually covered in the documentary. We also interview a university professor who deals with bushfires and exactly that. Now he's involved with the natural habitat and obviously with disasters. So there's a specific field that I for the life of me I can't remember it, but he was at Wollongong University, so I also interviewed him to get his opinion on this whole thing. And all this kind of marries together. But then we get to the ultimate question, what happens to the forest folk, to the yowies with fires like this? Because you talk to Indigenous people, and they will tell you that in their history, in their oral history, that there's no mention of such devastation. I mean, bushfires have always been part of Australia, right? We know that for sure. Even before Europeans settled here, fires were always happened in this country, but not to the extent, not to the ferocity that these fires actually ripped through, houses, communities, the national parks, the wilderness, and just reshaped everything. So we start talking about this, and then we actually go out to a location which luckily enough wasn't damaged by the fires. And this location, only a handful of people have actually seen it. Most of the people who've actually seen it have been Indigenous people, but Europeans, probably about only a handful who've actually seen this. And most of them, I think, were national park rangers. But it's a sacred spot, and we go out there, and I was given permission to actually film there. And this is an art gallery where the ancestors of Noel and the other elder Phil, it dates back to about 12,000 years old. So their ancestors actually created this art gallery, and in this art gallery you can see some really some detailed abstract drawings, but you can also see drawings of something that depicts a yowie with its arms raised up, and a group of people who also have their arms raised up, who apparently are the ancestors who are responding to the yowie. So they actually go into it and talk about the connection and how deep it's actually rooted in their culture. But that really has great value in my point of view anyway. And I know that a good friend of mine, John, who's actually been on your podcast, he's also First Nation. He's also First Nation heritage, but he's also he really was very happy the way it was presented, and I've also presented this to the elders down south, and they were very, very happy the way it was all presented. So it gives you an insight to the Indigenous side of things, but also we venture out and try to look for evidence and for any kind of life signs of the yowies up in the Blue Mountains and some of the other places that we previously had indirect contact with these forest folks. And it appears that the Blue Mountains have basically flatlined, because as one of the guys in the documentary, who was a friend of mine, also Tony Jinks, he used to be well, I'm not sure if he's actually still a firefighter, but he's a volunteer firefighter, but he's also a professor of psychology with a neuroscience background. But I actually took him out there, and the way he described it was a moonscape, and I think he nailed it to the T, because that's what it looked like. It looked like basically the ash was so thick that when you stepped on it, it basically, your foot sunk into the ground, and they were just remnants of trees and who knows what else. And the devastation was incredible. But then we go hunting for signs. So we end up going to Queensland and meeting up with the guys at AYR, and they were fantastic. They took us to the location where Buck actually filmed with a thermal imaging camera 2 yowies actually coming down. Gary also filmed one, I think, the previous week with Dean. So yeah, the guys actually took us out. We actually did quite a detailed interview with AYR, and going out to location just to see what they do. And so also the people who actually haven't seen how AYR conduct their work, and to the actual extent that these guys go to find evidence is just incredible. And then we come back down further south to Barrington Tops. Now, funny enough, we actually had an expedition arranged to go back to Barrington Tops, but unfortunately about a week before our trip, I got a call from the National Parks Ranger telling us that a big sinkhole opened up and basically swallowed half the road there. So we couldn't go back, but we did I ended up going north and interviewing a researcher, Katie Austin, who runs the Australian Cryptozoology Tribe, and she had some remarkable recordings of something that stood up in the scrubs, and something that looked like morphed or disappeared into the darkness. It was really, really bizarre. But the actual creature that stood up, you can definitely tell that it's something that of big mass, had a massive back, and it was actually holding something in its hand. So actually we interviewed Katie, and we have a sample of that video on the documentary as well. So these are some of the journeys that we end up taking, is looking for signs. We interviewed Gary Opert again, and he gives us feedback about, did the yowies migrate to other areas, or would have they stayed in their own region? And I mean, obviously he refers to them as mammalian carnivores, and carnivores, as we know it, they don't migrate. They have their own region, they have their own territory, and they cover that territory quite well, and they rarely venture outside of their own zone. So if that's the case, then I really hope that the forest folk that we had, or the presence that we had beforehand, and I really hope that they weren't wiped out, because the fires in the mountains in certain places were extremely severe. So we cover a large area, but the essence of it is that we go from a disaster zone all the way to looking for signs. And obviously we also went to the Pilligers looking for signs of yowie activity, on the thought that they may have, did they migrate up north, south, or wherever. So we actually wanted some kind of evidence to see what happened to the Australian yowie, and that's all part of the documentary.
Yeah, and I think it raises a really good question, because the Australia is made to burn, but these were a once in a lifetime disaster. The bushfires that happened have absolutely decimated the landscape, like you said, and these were essentially an unstoppable force that kind of just ripped through a good, I would almost say, quarter of Australia there. It was an absolutely gigantic landmass that was basically alight for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the amount of damage and the amount of loss that happened in there is just really unfathomable, because the scale of it is just impossible to comprehend at the end of the day. And if you think of how much wildlife was just lost in there, the thought of these creatures potentially being lost in there as well it's really quite a possibility.
Absolutely, Kate. I think it is, because look, I mean, regardless how well in tune you are with nature, the way these fires went, and the sudden shift in wind caused these fires to actually spread exponentially, and they just covered a massive area, as you say. And I think a lot of the areas that we don't have access to, that we haven't really seen, I don't think that we've personally, as civilians, have seen the full extent of the damage. The only damages that we've seen really are places that we can go to. But I think deep in the wilderness, where a lot of these fires did rage, I dare say that there are parts there that I don't think we'll ever recover. And it's devastating to think about that, because the amount of wildlife that's lost there. There's so much. I mean, a lot of our species are endangered, and we really need to start thinking about looking after our landscape, because without preservation, we're going to lose so much, and we're never going to get it back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's truly heartbreaking, and the amount of habitats that were just destroyed in minutes it's truly heartbreaking. And one thing that really kind of struck home for me with your documentary, and you kind of covered that there earlier, is the fact that you get this truly unique Indigenous point of view about everything that's kind of happened, because that's almost a culture that has a history that's really only passed through vocabulary.
That's right. Exactly. Some of the stories are told, I guess, in some artwork, but most of it, yeah, absolutely. It's all handed down orally from generation to generation, and that's another thing that a lot of these stories are going to get lost, and especially when some of these elders pass on, and there's nobody. In a lot of instances, there's nobody who they can tell their story to, that can actually nurture those stories and share it with the world to make sure that it's immortalized. There are a lot of places that that these stories get documented, and that's great. And I think that there should be more of that happening, because these stories teach us a very, very valuable lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that I love and hate about Australia, is the fact that the Indigenous culture is so amazing, but I feel like we almost don't get to know about it nearly anywhere enough, because it is just some of the most rich history that will ever exist on the planet. The Indigenous community within Australia has essentially been here for hundreds of thousands of years, if not longer. And the amount of knowledge that is just kind of passed down from generation to generation doesn't get enough celebration, in my humble opinion.
No, and I think there needs to be more focus on that, Kate. I think that from a political point of view, I think there needs to be more focus on that, and there needs to be more acceptance. I think that we are slowly changing, but I don't think that change is happening fast enough. And it's almost like, for example, cultural burnings, and like up north, up your way actually, there's a lot of cultural burning going on up there, and these cultural burnings are being taught to the next generation, First Nation people, but also to people who manage the fires there too. So and it's valuable information. These are things that I feel that and we touched that on in the documentary about how we feel, or anyway, I feel that land management needs to be handed back to the Indigenous people, to the elders. But I think a joint operation. This is what the professor who I interviewed actually said, that he doesn't feel that because of the vast areas of Australia, he says that the way this would work is that there would be, if there'd be a joint operation between more contemporary form of fire management or land management to work alongside with the Indigenous cultural burnings, and together we could learn so much. I guess we could learn as Europeans more so than I guess the Indigenous peoples. They've been doing that for hundreds of thousands of years. But we'd learn so much from that. So when to do these burnings and how to do it, because they've been looking after the land for so long. And there are records of when Europeans first came here, and some of the records state that some of these places that they went to in the wilderness look like parks. The native grass was growing at a manageable height. It looked like it was all landscaped. It was just the way the land was managed. It was to get rid of all that overgrowth, that undergrowth that would be invasive, and they just basically manage it so well that and those large eucalyptus trees that actually provided the coverage, and they didn't burn. Obviously, they burnt all the scrub around it, but these large eucalyptus trees, because of their sheer size, they were able to withstand that heat. But look, I mean, that all this is actually in Bruce's book, Dark Emu. But 100%. Look, I think that there needs to be more emphasis put on Indigenous cultural practices than there is at the moment.
Yeah, and I think just the viewpoint that they have is rather unique and rather special in the way that they would just have this incredible knowledge of creatures like the yowie that we wouldn't have, because essentially we just haven't been here for that. And now a quick word from our sponsor. Also, are you wanting more content? Why not become a Believe Plus member? You'll get access to exclusive podcasts and episodes that aren't available to the public. Not only that, you'll also get our regular feed without any ads. Head to believepod.com/plus to sign up today for just $5 a month.
No, that's right. And I think the interesting perspective that that the elders actually described in the documentary, it tells us some of the telltale signs that even some European people who've actually been out looking for yowies have actually encountered, and but their approach is very different. Where we tend to push the envelope, but because the Indigenous people would obviously they work together with the forest people. They had their respected boundaries, so they kind of worked side by side. Each of them knew what to do when it came to land management or creating that balance in the environment, and it worked very, very well. And this is just what the feedback that I got back from the elders. It was a very, very well balanced ecosystem or environment that we had in this country. But that all changed obviously after colonization happened.
Yeah, and there's something that I wish we would really take on board is how the American, I guess, public has really integrated the Indigenous people of the Americas within their almost everyday cultural beliefs. Is that's just part of their lives now, and there's no really second guessing it or anything like that. It's just, this is how it is, and it just works really well. And that's coming from a complete third point of view from where I am, but from what I understand, that has a really good knock-on effect into these really niche subjects like the paranormal and Bigfoot, Sasquatches, skinwalkers, things like that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's so much that we can learn from these people, because ultimately, and this is a discussion that I had with a friend of mine, is that when we go out into the wilderness, we come from a noisy background, from a noisy environment. We sometimes work in an office, where we use the traffic, we listen to television, we're not used to this solitude, this quietness that you'd get when you go into the wilderness. And sometimes we need to learn to listen and pay attention to the road signs. And I think most of us tend to overlook all that. And it's I think that adopting the way the First Nation people approached all this, and it doesn't matter what we're dealing with, what kind of cryptid that we're dealing with. I think that one is that the respect needs to be given to the land and to whatever is lingering in the wilderness, and two is to be observant and to be actually to quieten ourselves down, because I know out of my own experience, if I go into, let's say, up to the mountains, and coming out from noise, and then you're trying to settle down into a quiet environment, you have this ringing in your ear. It's almost like tinea. You have this ringing in your ear, and it takes a little while before that actually goes away and you start to in-tune yourself. But I do believe that there's so much more out there apart from yowies and Bigfoot that we can learn a lot from. But it's funny because there's so much comparison, like there's so much similarities between the Native American stories and the Australian Indigenous stories, and especially with Bigfoot. Skinwalkers, I don't know because I haven't actually looked into it. But then we have these dogmen encounters now that may have been around for a long time, but we don't know what they are. But again, we have those stories in America too. So there's so many similarities between the two nations that it's almost uncanny.
Yeah, and it's really exciting. Like you said, there is more dogman encounters happening over here in Australia, and I don't know if that's because more people are talking about it, because say one person comes out and talks about it, other people are starting to talk about their encounters, because I always say to people that dogman encounters are one of the most difficult things to talk about, because you try to articulate the fact that you're essentially seeing something that most people would just connect with a werewolf. Almost sounds a little bit ludicrous at the end of the day.
Well, exactly. But like a lot of the stories that you hear, that they do seem to resemble that because of the human-like characteristics of these creatures. I know that when I was in Europe, and I've spoken about this before, that we had an encounter there where my son actually had a full-blown experience with one of these creatures over in Europe, and it was looking down at our car, and its head was out of proportion with its body. I didn't actually see the animal. I saw it cross the road, but look, for me that was enough for me to think, okay, well, where do you draw the line with the fantastic? People are seeing, Bigfoot, yowies, people are seeing all sorts of weird stuff. They're seeing things in the sky. They're seeing weird stuff in the ground. I know over the 20 odd years that I've been doing this kind of stuff, Kate, that I've seen so many weird stuff that people would find it very difficult to digest really some of these stories because they're so bizarre and so out there. But when you start having multiple witnesses, that's where you start thinking, okay, well, we need to start paying attention to this kind of stuff because, ultimately, you can put it down to, auto-suggestion, but when you have people who see the same thing and they react the same way and describe the same thing, I think we can throw that theory out the window. So, yeah, there's so much weirdness out there in this world. I mean, where do we draw the line, Kate? That's my question. With what? Where do we draw the line?
And I think if we draw a line, the line would move, because honestly, I think it would, because I think the human mind is it's an incredible thing, and there's almost this like wishing of things into existence, and it really opens up Pandora's box, because literally nothing is off the cards.
Definitely. Oh, definitely. I mean, you've interviewed me now a few times, and I've told, a few of the experiences that I've had, and also the people that I've been with. And it's just, you look back over the years and think, my goodness me, I mean, people have seen, everything from rake-like creatures. I mean, I've seen something that resembled a small humanoid that appeared to levitate, for goodness sakes. I mean, it's when you start experiencing stuff like that, and when you start hearing stories from other people who are genuine and they were there with you, it's just, there's something else in this world. There's something going on, and I don't know if some people have actually decoded what's going on yet, or maybe we are looking in the wrong direction. I don't know. It's one of those tough ones, because I guess the more you look into it, and we had this discussion before, the more you look into it, the more questions you're going to have.
Yeah, that's it. We were talking before we kind of hit record, and I kind of said to you that I can't go looking for this stuff because the rabbit holes will suck you in, and then where do you stop? You don't.
No, absolutely. You just keep falling and falling, and you just, you lose yourself in it, and your perception of reality of your everyday life starts to fade away, and you start to neglect people around you, and you just, I've seen so many people fall into that rabbit hole, and I'm one of those people too. I've been there too, so I know exactly what it's like, and it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant at all. It's a blind pursuit of something that you probably will never find the answers to. And like I said before, the only thing that you have is more questions. So you can keep going until, your last breath. But some of us might be lucky enough to find maybe a hint of what we're looking for, maybe some understanding, or maybe some form of, I guess, some kind of information that may resemble an answer to us. But is that really going to be enough?
The hunger's always there when you've got a curious mind, so you have to be careful what you feed it.
Very true, very true. Kat, I didn't mention something which is absolutely important and vital in this documentary, that this is the first time I actually interviewed a very well-known podcaster.
Yeah, I was kind of tiptoeing around that. I was going to leave that to be a little bit of a surprise, but I do have to let you know that I am in this documentary. It is very exciting for me, and it gave me a very humble moment that I could show to one of my friends who is an absolute movie buff, that I now have a listing on IMDb, and I'm going to print that, frame it, and give it to him for Christmas.
Oh, goodness me, mate, that was fantastic. It was a tough one and you did a really good job. And for the good people out there, when they see it, Kate actually filmed himself. So he did a really good job with lighting, with depth of field, everything. He just did a fantastic job with audio. It was a remote interview, which I've never done in my life before. It was just really weird, but it was a fantastic experience, because I was on the other end. We're doing a Zoom call, I think it was, and I was asking the questions, and he was looking at me on a laptop and he had everything all set up in his studio. So, mate, it was really well done.
Yeah, it turned out really well, and it was a really fun experience. For me, it was kind of like a gelling of both worlds. It was like doing a podcast, but I was on the other end. It was unique for me, that's for sure.
Yeah, what is it like to be interviewed? That's right, on the other side of the table. I know I don't like it. I don't like having a camera in my face. I like being behind the camera, not in front of it. So that's why I struggled a lot with this one as well, because I actually had my daughter help me, who's in film school, but she was the one who actually helped me with the filming of my interview in it, because I know I've had a few people, and Don and my wife and my daughter even say, and I think even you said it as well, Kate, that look, you need to be in front of the camera for this one. I kind of listened to that and went with the punches, went with the role. But yeah, it was interesting. It is interesting because you're not on the other side of the camera, so it's very, very hard to like when I was being interviewed, that you're trying to be conscious about lighting and everything else, and make sure that the camera's set up right. I'm asking a million questions to my daughter. Have you got that set? Yep. You got that set up? Audio's running? Yep. How's the audio? Good. No problems at all. Dad, shut up and just get on with the interview. So,
you know what? I really did enjoy that part of the documentary, because you see a lot of documentaries and they may have like someone doing a narrative or a voiceover for it, but you're kind of in the driver's seat for it, and you really do control the documentary quite well. And it's almost like everything is from your perspective. You're the storyteller, and you're taking us on the journey. Because a bit of a spoiler alert, I've had a chance to see the doco before it got released, so thank you very much for the early access. But it is such an impressive piece of work, and it's just done in such a way where you pay so much attention to every aspect of it and give everyone their real chance to shine. I think it's an incredible piece of work that you've done here, Attila.
I appreciate it, mate. I think, look, I mean, the credit really goes towards the people who contributed their time and their efforts, and their own resources, their own sort of, pieces of evidence, and they're the ones who actually made the documentary how it is. But I think it's very important for us to get Aussie content out there, and I keep harping on about that. I'm a big believer of having Australian stories told, regardless what they are, and obviously having this undying interest of the unexplained. I just feel an obligation to keep on keeping on and keep telling, or finding people to tell these stories, these fantastic stories. So not only people in Australia can listen to them and appreciate these people's encounters, but also understand that Australia is also one of those places in the world that actually has a lot of interesting things going on. And look, you never know, might even attract more people from the States to come over for a holiday. You just don't know. But I mean, the intention is really to get those stories out and to immortalize these stories.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Australia does have this incredible history that just doesn't get told in the way that it should. Like you said, over in the United States and other places around the world, that these types of documentaries and stories kind of get told almost on a weekly basis. It almost feels like there's a new Bigfoot or kind of Sasquatch documentary out at any time. But over here, it's very limited. So, I think it's really great, and I think it's really eye-opening to the general public to show them, hey, this is kind of going on in our backyard.
Absolutely, 100%, Kate. I don't think there's enough content. I do, encourage that to, for people out there who are filmmakers, is to sort of look more into these type of stories and just keep telling these stories, because that's how these are going to be documented and remembered, and not just in a small circle, but, in areas where, you have a global reach, and where people from around the world can actually appreciate what this country is all about. And funny enough, I've had people from the States asking me, just sort of more like saying, well, we didn't know that, Australia had these types of forests or mountainous regions. Some people thought that Australia was mainly all desert landscape. So, I mean, they've never been here, and for someone who doesn't travel, I could kind of get that, why they think that Australia, the limited amount of information that the people all have is that this is a sunburnt country and that's it. It's as dry as hell, and everything's out there to get us. But in actual fact, we've got some of the most beautiful landscapes in the world. I mean, if you're in Australia, I mean, why would you want to go anywhere else? Because we've got just about everything here. From up your end, beautiful lush rainforests, and you got the beautiful mountainous regions of the Great Dividing Range and the the valleys down south, and oh mate, just I'm harping on about it, but we've got the beautiful desert landscape in Central Australia, and you got Tasmania, which is almost a completely different environment on its own, but it's just an amazing country. It really is.
Oh, it really is. You're so right about that. I always say that the best holiday you can have in Australia is in your backyard, because it is the best country in the world. And I know I'm being completely biased about that, but you absolutely nailed it on the head. We've got some of the best landscapes and the best adventures that you'll be able to ever go on.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, 100%. Like the expeditions that we've taken with the guys, and even Yowie Dan, who's part of the documentaries, is actually quite instrumental with this one as well, as he's helped me sort of, he was actually helping me put or connect me with people who've had some interesting stories and experiences. But Dan and I have been to a few places now, and even with John, we've been going to some really, really interesting places, and places I wouldn't have gone otherwise. And I dare say some of the places that we've went to is off the beaten track. Down the side of this mountainous places, making our own paths and tracks, and then coming into these incredible places where there's waterfalls, there's creeks, and these massive fern trees. It's almost like you're stepping back into the Cretaceous period. The first thing you're looking for is, where's the dinosaur? It's just such a beautiful place. And we have so many beautiful places like that in Australia. It's places that haven't really been explored, but I've had the privilege of doing a lot of that stuff, and I wouldn't have done it anywhere else. So yeah, look, mate, 100% agree. It is a breathtaking country, but we have a lot of really weird stuff, a lot of weird stories that come out from here, and I mean that in the most respectful way. Strange and unexplained stuff that come out from this country, and I think all you need to do is just dig deep enough, and then you will find some real gems out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with you about basically everything you've said there. And it really does kind of lead me. I'm going to ask you a bit of a loaded question here, Attila, because, this is your second round into the world of the yowie within your documentary journeys. What have you learned that you didn't really know before? Because the thing with the doco is that it usually takes you through a bit of an internal journey yourself. And I imagine that this one, with the amount of time and the amount of effort and the amount of work that you really put into it, really would have taken you on your own kind of journey in that whole process.
Oh, absolutely, Kate. I mean, this went on for 2.5 years, and obviously largely because of the COVID situation that we had, and also weather dictated a lot of our movements too. But look, mate, without this documentary, I don't think I'd be the person I am today, because with the people I've met, and these people have taught me so much, their own life experiences, but I've also got a deeper understanding of country, of the Indigenous culture, and I look at it completely different. I was accepted as a brother with the elders, and for me that was one of the greatest respects I could ever imagine. And that connection with land and with culture is so deep. It's really, really hard to express in common terminology. This connection that you have is just, I don't know, gives you a deeper perspective of when you go out into the wilderness, and when you go out in amongst the trees and the animals and everything else, you see everything differently. It's almost like you've opened up a third eye or a sixth sense. I don't know how to actually put this, but you see the world, the environment differently, and you respect it in a completely different way as well. You just have this next level. It's almost like leveling up. That's only the way I can put it. It's a very deep and a very personal experience, and I think that yes, it does elevate that additional sensory, that additional sort of sixth sense within one's being, I guess. Like I said, it's very, very hard to sort of describe, but it does give you a very, very deep and meaningful insight into our world that we have here, into this beautiful country.
It's truly fascinating, and it's always fantastic to talk to you, mate, because every time I talk to you, I feel like I get enlightened, and and I'm not even joking. I feel like I do, because you just have this incredible sense of, I guess, how the weirdness in our world, and I mean that in full respect, of how the weirdness works and how you can translate that into not only something that's an enjoyable documentary, but something that is actually knowledge building as well, which I think is so important.
Absolutely, yeah. I really hope that I've achieved that, and I really hope that the people who watch it will enjoy it, because it was a lot of hard work, but the people who contribute to it definitely created this unique perspective that I've never actually, have sort of done before. So I really hope people will enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I let you shoot off, mate, where can people find out more about this documentary, and where can they watch it?
Yes, well, if you're in Australia and you have a VPN, you can pretty much access it on Amazon, iTunes, Apple TV, and a whole host of other platforms that it's going on. I've only recently found out that the iTunes access for Australia is not available, which really upset me, because the whole idea with our distributor is to make it available in Australia. But at this point in time, I'm still working on that. So it's okay, because look, if there is no access on the release date on the 7th of December, we will do something. So we'll make sure that the Aussie audience also get a bite of this.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Believe Paranormal and UFO podcast. If you have had an encounter and you would like to share it, please get in touch with me. My email address is believepod@gmail.com. Finally, don't forget to follow us on all our social media outlets, and be sure to join our Discord server to talk to other listeners of the show. You'll find all these links in our show notes. Thank you.